Omar Little is usually talked about like a myth: the shotgun, the whistling, the long coat, the way corners empty when people hear the tune coming down the street. In The Wire, Omar becomes the kind of man people talk about before he even arrives. Half the time, he feels less like a street criminal and more like a bedtime story. Baltimore tells itself to scare grown men. He robs drug dealers, walks into danger with a calm face, and lives by a code that sounds impossible inside the world he lives in. But when Omar is with Butchie, the myth changes shape. He becomes smaller, quieter, more human. That relationship matters because Butchie is one of the very few people who can speak to Omar without fear, without performance, and without needing anything cheap from him. Everyone else sees Omar as a threat, a tool, a legend, or a problem. Butchie sees the man underneath the reputation. He sees the anger, the pride, the wounds, and the limits. He understands Omar's code because he understands the street older than Omar does. And more importantly, he understands that Omar's code is powerful, dangerous, and fragile. Case in point, Omar can scare almost anyone in Baltimore, but Butchie can tell him the truth. That alone tells you what kind of relationship they have. Butchie is blind physically, yet he sees Omar more clearly than nearly anyone else in the show. That is one of those Wire details that feels almost too obvious if you say it out loud, but the show never makes it corny. Butchie does not need to see Omar's face to know what kind of mood he is in. He does not need to watch Omar walk through the door to know what trouble is following him. He hears the voice, feels the silence, knows the rhythm, and understands the cost. Their scenes have a different temperature from Omar's scenes with everyone else. When Omar is on the street, he is usually in control of the room. Even when he is vulnerable, there is danger around him. He might be hurt, grieving, or trapped, yet the threat still moves outward. But in Butchie's bar, Omar can sit down and let somebody else carry the weight for a minute. He still has that hard Omar edge, because Omar is never exactly soft. But the mask loosens, and that tells us something important about Omar's entire character. Omar is independent, but he is not alone by nature. That distinction matters. He lives outside the formal structure of the drug game. He has no crew in the traditional sense. No boss, no lieutenant, no package. No corner he needs to defend every day like a miserable little kingdom. He lives as a predator moving around other predators. That makes him seem free. In some ways he is. He can move how he wants. He can strike where he wants. He can disappear when he wants. He follows his own rules, which in Baltimore is almost a supernatural ability. Still, Omar needs people. He needs Brandon. He needs Ronaldo. He needs people who love him. He needs people who help him stay connected to something other than revenge. And he needs Butchie in a deeper, steadier way. Butchie is not just a friend. He is not just an old contact. He is Omar's bank, advisor, intelligence network, moral sounding board, and emotional safe house. In a world where almost every relationship has a price on it, Butchie is one of the rare connections that feels earned. The best way to understand Butchie is to understand what Omar trusts him with. Omar trusts him with money. In the street, money is never just money. It is safety, future, power, and survival. Omar makes his living robbing men who would kill their own cousins over a missing package. He knows exactly how quickly trust becomes a funeral, yet he keeps his money with Butchie. That choice says more than any speech could. Omar, a man who survives by suspicion, lets Butchie hold the thing everyone else would steal. That is case in point number one. Omar trusts Butchie with the part of his life most criminals protect hardest. Money exposes the truth of relationships in The Wire. People talk loyalty all day, and most of it means nothing once cash hits the table. Avon and Stringer fracture over power and business. Marlowe's whole empire is built on fear and possession. Proposition Joe thinks he can manage relationships through deals, and even he gets sold out by family. The game makes trust expensive. Omar has seen enough to know better than almost anyone, so when Omar keeps his money with Butchie, the show is quietly telling us this bond is different. Butchie is also one of Omar's main sources of information. He hears things, people come through his place, the old heads talk, the street breathes around him. He collects stories, rumors, warnings, and names. Omar may be the man with the shotgun, but Butchie helps him know where to aim it. That matters because Omar's reputation can make him feel like a one-man army, and he is never fully that. He is brave, clever, and terrifying, but his work depends on information. He needs eyes and ears. The irony is that one of his most reliable sets of eyes is a blind man. The show keeps doing that with Butchie. It gives him a physical limitation and makes him one of the sharpest readers of people in Baltimore. He cannot see the room, yet he knows who is lying, who is scared, who is playing too much, and who is standing too close to death. That makes him the perfect guide for Omar. Omar is brilliant in motion. Butchie is brilliant in stillness. Omar is the strike. Butchie is the pause before the strike. Their relationship works because Butchie never worships Omar. A lot of people in Baltimore react to Omar like he is a monster or a celebrity. Dealers run from him. Kids imitate him. Cops talk about him like a strange exception to the rules. Even people who admire him can treat him like a symbol. Butchie treats him like a man he has known too long to be impressed by the costume. He respects Omar, clearly. He loves him too in the old street way where affection usually comes wrapped in insults, warnings, and practical advice. But he never loses his ability to call Omar out. Case in point, Butchie can warn Omar about his pride. Omar's code is one of the most famous parts of the character. A man gotta have a code becomes almost a thesis statement for how he sees himself. He does not kill civilians. He does not put his gun on people outside the game. He robs drug dealers because, in his mind, they chose the life. This code separates him from men like Marlowe, who turn violence into a language everyone has to speak. Omar's code gives him shape. It also gives him a kind of vanity. That vanity is easy to miss because Omar is usually right compared to the people around him. He has more honor than the drug crews. He has more courage than the politicians. He has more honesty than half the police department. Still, the show never lets us pretend Omar's code makes him safe. His pride keeps pulling him back into danger. His reputation demands maintenance. His grief demands revenge. His sense of justice can become personal, and once it becomes personal, Butchie often becomes the man trying to keep him from walking straight into fire. Butchie knows Omar has rules. He also knows rules do not stop bullets. That is one of the quiet tragedies of their relationship. Butchie respects Omar's code, yet he understands the street will not respect it forever. Omar may refuse to hurt people outside the game, but men like Marlowe will not return that courtesy. Omar may believe certain lines should stay uncrossed, but the new generation cares less about lines and more about control. Butchie lives long enough to see the street change, and he understands that Omar's legend is becoming less protective over time. With Avon, Omar is dealing with a violent man inside an older street structure. Avon can be brutal, and Brandon's death shows exactly how ugly that world can get. Still, Avon understands reputation, rules, and the old ideas of what brings heat. With Marlowe, Omar faces something colder. Marlowe wants his name to mean fear with no romance attached. He does not care about the beauty of the game or the stories people tell. He wants silence, obedience, and bodies hidden in vacant houses. Butchie understands Marlowe's world quickly. He knows this kind of enemy will attack the parts of Omar that Omar thinks are protected. That brings us to the most important part of the relationship. Butchie is Omar's vulnerability. For most of the show, people struggle to get at Omar because Omar is hard to find, hard to predict, and hard to scare. He moves between worlds. He has friends, lovers, contacts, and hideouts. He can vanish. He can also walk directly at danger when nobody expects it. His whole life is built around staying outside the normal chain of command. If you want to hurt a soldier, you hit his crew. If you want to hurt a boss, you hit his money. If you want to hurt a civilian, you hit his family. With Omar, the target is harder to see. Marlowe's people find it. They go after Butchie. The killing of Butchie is one of the cruelest moves in The Wire because it is not just strategic. It is personal in the most efficient way. Chris and Snoop torture him for Omar's location. Butchie refuses to give Omar up. That refusal tells the whole story of the relationship. He is old, he is blind, he is outmatched physically. He is facing people who have no mercy and no sentimental attachment to him. He knows what is coming, and still he protects Omar. That is case and point number 2. Butchie dies holding Omar's trust. In a show filled with betrayal, that choice lands hard. People sell out friends, family, partners, crews, and whole neighborhoods. D'Angelo gets betrayed by his own mother's ambition and his uncle's survival instinct. Wallace gets killed by boys who love him and fear the system more. Stringer betrays Avon in one direction. Avon betrays Stringer in another. Proposition Joe gets set up by Cheese, which is almost impressive in its ugliness, because Cheese somehow manages to look stupid and poisonous at the same time. The Wire keeps showing how the game turns relationships into leverage. Butchie refuses to become leverage willingly. He becomes leverage only because Marlowe's people are willing to torture and kill him. Even there, they fail to get what they want from him directly. They get Omar back to Baltimore through the murder itself, through the emotional wound it creates. They cannot make Butchie speak, so they make his body send the message, and Omar hears it. That is where the relationship becomes tragic. Butchie's final act is loyalty, but Omar's response shows the dangerous side of being loved by Omar. Once Butchie is killed, Omar comes back from hiding. He returns injured, furious, and reckless. He goes after Marlowe's organization with a level of rage that feels different from his earlier robberies. This is no longer just Omar taking from the game. This is Omar trying to punish a man who crossed into the small sacred space Omar had left. Butchie's death pulls Omar back into the street at the exact moment he should stay away from it. That is the brutal irony. Butchie protects Omar by refusing to speak. His murder still becomes the rope that drags Omar back. Marlowe understands reputation well enough to know that Omar cannot let it stand. If Omar stays gone, his name suffers. If Omar returns, his body suffers. Marlowe turns Omar's code against him without needing to defeat him in a fair fight. It is one of Marlowe's ugliest victories because he attacks love, loyalty, and grief, all while pretending it is just business. Omar's reaction to Butchie's death shows how deeply Butchie mattered. When Brandon dies, Omar's grief becomes revenge against the Barksdale crew. Brandon was his lover, and the killing was horrific. That pain shapes Omar early in the series and sets him against Avon's people with a kind of righteous fury. But Butchie's death hits differently because Butchie represents the older foundation of Omar's life. Brandon is love and youth and intimacy. Butchie is trust, memory, shelter, and guidance. Losing Brandon hurts Omar's heart. Losing Butchie damages the structure around him. After Butchie is gone, Omar has nobody who can truly slow him down. That matters because Omar needs someone who can do that. He is too brave for his own good. He can be patient when planning a robbery, but grief makes him direct. He will stake out a corner, track a target, and build a trap with care. When the wound is personal, he starts moving like a man daring the world to kill him. Butchie was one of the few people who could remind him that surviving is part of the code too. Without Butchie, Omar's final run against Marlowe feels like a legend losing its handler. The balcony jump is the perfect image for this. Omar is trapped by Chris, Snoop, and Michael. His leg is damaged badly when he jumps from several stories up, and from that point forward he is moving through Baltimore wounded. The myth keeps going, but the body underneath it is breaking down. He hobbles through the streets calling Marlowe out. He robs Marlowe's people. He attacks the organization in pieces. He becomes more frightening in one sense because he no longer seems concerned with survival. But he also becomes easier to kill. The Wire does something very sharp with Omar's ending. It spends years building him as a legend, and his actual death comes from Canard, a child with a gun in a corner store. No grand showdown, no final duel with Marlowe, no operatic street judgment. Omar dies suddenly, almost awkwardly, in a place where the myth has no room to prepare itself. The city misidentifies his body at first. The paperwork barely understands who he was. The street will tell stories, but the institution processes him like another corpse. Butchie's death is the emotional beginning of that ending. Because after Butchie is killed, Omar's story narrows. His world becomes revenge. The warmth around him disappears. Ronaldo is gone from the center of the story. Butchie is dead. The people who knew Omar as a man are fewer. The city sees the legend, Marlowe sees a threat, the kids see an image, and Omar keeps walking through pain like the story itself can protect him. It cannot. That is case and point number 3. Butchie was one of the last things keeping Omar human in a city that wanted him to become folklore. Their relationship also tells us something about age in The Wire. Butchie belongs to the older street world. He has history, he has a bar, he has connections, he understands favors and warnings and the language people used before Marlowe's kind of silence took over. Omar moves through that older world too, even though he is younger. His code feels almost old-fashioned. He believes civilians should be spared. He believes people in the game accepted certain risks. He believes some lines carry meaning. Butchie's presence reinforces that Omar is connected to an older idea of the street. That older idea is still violent and criminal. The Wire never asks us to romanticize it too much. Avon's world produces torture, murder, addiction, and ruined families. Still, there is a social grammar there. People talk, people negotiate, people remember names. People understand consequences beyond immediate fear. Marlowe strips that away. He does not want a street with memory. He wants a street with his name stamped into it. Omar and Butchie stand against Marlowe in different ways. Omar stands against him openly, with a shotgun and a whistle and insults shouted into the street. Butchie stands against him quietly by refusing to betray the man he loves. Omar's resistance is theatrical. Butchie's resistance is private. Omar's version becomes legend. Butchie's version becomes sacrifice. And the show values both. The relationship also complicates Omar's image as a loner. People call Omar a lone wolf because he often works outside the major crews, but his survival depends on a web of relationships. Butchie is the clearest example. Omar's independence is real, yet it is supported by people who believe in him. That makes his story more grounded. He is not magically floating above Baltimore. He has a network, and that network has human costs. Butchie pays the highest one. The tragedy is that Omar's enemies eventually understand the same thing the audience understands. They understand Omar has a heart. They understand the heart can be attacked. For years, Omar's morality makes him powerful because people know he follows certain rules. By season 5, those rules become part of the map his enemies use to hurt him. Marlowe's side has no interest in beating Omar's code morally. They exploit it. They know Omar will come back for Butchie. They know grief will bring him out of hiding. They know love can be used as bait. That is one of the darkest lessons in The Wire. Good qualities do not always save people. Sometimes they give the world a cleaner target. Omar's loyalty to Butchie is admirable. Butchie's loyalty to Omar is even more admirable because it costs him everything. Yet neither act of loyalty defeats the system around them. The game absorbs it. It turns the bond into a tactic. It turns Butchie's death into a move on the board. It turns Omar's grief into a predictable response. The Wire is cruel that way. It allows people to have codes, love, courage, and dignity. It also places them inside a machine that grinds those things down without needing to understand them. Still, Butchie's death is not meaningless. It reveals the truth of both men. Butchie's final moments reveal that his bond with Omar was never just convenience. He was not simply Omar's banker. He was not just an old man with information. He was family in the only way that matters inside a world where official family often fails. He protects Omar when protection has no reward left. He refuses to trade loyalty for breath. That choice gives Butchie a quiet greatness. Omar's response reveals that beneath the legend, he is still driven by love and grief. He returns because Butchie mattered. He risks everything because some losses cannot be swallowed. The same emotional force that makes Omar compelling also helps destroy him. He cannot become cold enough to survive Marlowe's world. He can be violent, calculating, and terrifying, but he cannot detach from the people who gave his life meaning. That is the core of Omar and Butchie's relationship. Butchie is the place where Omar's myth rests. When Omar walks into Butchie's world, the audience gets a rare look at the man behind the shotgun. He trusts. He listens. He worries. He receives guidance. He belongs somewhere. That belonging is small, hidden, and dangerous, but it exists. In a show where almost every institution fails and almost every crew eats its own, that small pocket of trust feels radical. And when it is destroyed, Omar starts moving toward his end. The great sadness is that Butchie probably understood this before Omar did. He knew Omar's pride. He knew the street. He knew Marlowe's people were different. He knew the wrong wound could bring Omar back into a fight he could not fully win. But love does not give Butchie control over Omar. It only gives him the right to tell the truth, hold the money, give the warning, and keep the secret when death enters the room. That is enough to make him one of the most important people in Omar's life. Omar's legend belongs to Baltimore, but Omar's trust belonged to Butchie. And in The Wire, that is about as sacred as anything gets.